Today we will have a number of things. So this is just a welcome. My name is Mandy Higgins. I'm the Community Engagement Administrator at the Kentucky Historical Society, and it is one of my great joys to actually administer the Kentucky Local History Trust Fund program, because this program, as we'll talk about in the grants that they do, one of the few times that we get to go across the state and hand out money and celebrate new projects in a way that is, hard to do right now. So it's a really exciting program, and it does really good work. This program has existed for about 4 years now. This will be our 5th year of funding. And as we go through, I'll tell you a little bit more about where it came from and how that went. But this is one of my mini jobs, doing local history outreach across the state for the Kentucky Historical Society. My colleague, Sarah Schmidt, who will introduce herself now, also has a large grant program through the Oral History Commission, and she can tell you a little bit about that.
Sorry, I stopped my video instead of unmuting myself. I am Sarah Schmidt. I'm the administrator of the Oral History Administrator for the Kentucky Historical Society. And I am the sole staff person of the Kentucky Oral History Commission, which is housed in the Kentucky Historical Society. And I have several grant programs, and I will be telling you about them more in depth in a few minutes. But just to sort of explain why we do this in tandem, one of the few things that the Local History Trust Fund will not fund our oral histories, and that's because we do have these 2 programs, but we wanted to make sure that you had opportunities to see how you can get funding for both, if that is something that you're interested in. The other thing is I am a grants administrator, and so any of these types of questions about answering these questions in a way, or answering these expectations in the grant in a way that the panelists will respond to, I have sort of a, the insider's view of that too, so and can serve in a resource that way as well.
Thank you, Sarah. And we're also joined today by Maggie McAdams from Shaker Village, who's going to tell us a little bit about her project in just a few minutes, but I wanted to give her a moment to introduce herself too.
Have to unmute it. Hi all, I'm very happy to be here to share our project and to share the wonderful work of the Local History Trust Fund. So happy to be here. Again, my name is Maggie McAdams. I am the Education and Engagement Manager at Shaker Village of Pleasant Hill.
Great. So as you can see on the slide, we'll go through the timeline of the trust fund, learn and hear a little bit more about how Shaker Village at Pleasant Hill was able to use trust fund dollars in this very odd time and to still get their work done. And then we'll go through the application process, other grant opportunities. So that's Sarah's moment. We'll do a brief scoring exercise, and we do this because we feel like one of the best ways to understand the grant process is to work as a scorer, to see how people who are adjudicating the process, what they take into consideration as they help us make decisions about funding. And so you'll step into their shoes for a minute, and then we'll spend some time questions and answers if they're there. We were going to send folks into breakout rooms, but with this number of people, we felt it would, we didn't have quite enough administrators to make those breakout rooms useful. So what we're going to do is make ourselves available either at the end of this call or through appointment to talk with folks about their projects. So please, throughout this, you can take as many notes as you want, drop things in the chat, know that we are here to help you and to work through your questions with your grants. That's one of the joys that we have in this. We love to talk to people, and so we have a better idea of what's coming and to make sure that these are really strong, really competitive applications. All right, so the trust fund. Local History Trust Fund, this is the 5th year, so 2020 will be the 5th year that we will be awarding grants. And you may be thinking, oh, these numbers are weird, right? Because they start, we say 2020. That's because the Local History Trust Fund is completely funded through Kentucky state taxpayers and their generosity. On your state taxes, there's a spot towards the end where you can designate a portion of your state tax return, if you have one, to go into various trust funds that are administered by state agencies across the Commonwealth. Ours is the Kentucky Local History Trust Fund, and every year since 2015, Kentucky residents have contributed a varying amount of money to that trust fund that we then re-grant out to local history minded, and we'll get to that in a second. So it's not just local history organizations, but history minded organizations across the Commonwealth. And 100% of that money is re-granted. So when you do, you or your constituents or your friends or your parents or whomever you're going to cajole to make your mark for history, all of that money is going back out into communities across the Commonwealth. And you can see this in the map. We have a number of counties that have not received funds yet, but we hope that they will apply and we are able to continue to expand this program to all corners of the Commonwealth. But it does have good, we do look for geographic diversity. We look for an opportunity to fund in counties that have not been funded before, all of those sorts of things. And we are really proud that in this 4th year, so the year that we awarded this year, we crossed $50,000 in awards. And so hopefully we get to 100 even faster than we did to that 50,000. So what are these awards? There are 2 types of grants. There are planning grants and project grants. Planning grants are grants that are really about getting your footing under you to figure out what you want to do, maybe working with a consultant, things like that. Project grants are actually created. An actual project, and Maggie's going to tell us a little bit about how their project grant in just a minute. But those can be anything from an exhibition to collection storage and management, to some preservation. Now, we do not fund brick and mortar projects. We do not fund, as Sarah said, oral history. We do not fund historical markers, but we do fund education programs, outreach programs, some facility improvement if it is obviously within the amount of money that you're saying, and pertinent to the bottom line or the mission of the museum or organization, and then collections management and stewardship. So most anything can fall under this as long as it's not in those, 3 big exceptions. A 4th one would be that we do not fund fundraising. So that would not be something that we would fund. The process itself, applications are available now, and I'm going to drop a direct link into the chat box. They must be postmarked by October 15th. That can be a physical postmark if you are mailing it, a physical copy, or an email postmark by 11:59 p.m. on the 15th of October. Given our pandemic world and many of us being telecommuting or away from easy accessibility to mailing things, we are willing to work with you through an electronic submission. That's fine. I would appreciate if you could give me a heads up to be on the lookout for it. I will tell you that our email server has rejected large attachments in the past. So if you have a number of attachments that you're including in your application, it would be best that you let me know so I can let you know if it doesn't come through or I haven't heard from it. After we've done all the basic review and put together a database and those sorts of things, we will impanel adjudicators, both internal KHS adjudicators and external local history experts, to review based on guidelines that you will see today. In December, we will notify everyone who applied of their status. So awarded or not awarded, full or partial funding, you will know in December. Projects cannot begin before January 1st, 2021, and need to be wrapped up within the calendar year. Now, assuming that COVID is still with us well into 2021. There will be some wiggle room, and we will talk about how you can ask for extensions or modify projects, but you should be thinking about a pretty tight project schedule. The best thing, one of the things I like the best about this is that we have adopted a policy of coming to the sites to present checks, and you'll see Maggie and Shaker Village check in just a minute. They're, the fake, they're not big Bob Vila checks, but they're at least fake checks. We don't know what that's going to look like in a COVID world, but we're going to work on finding a way to be in the places where we are presenting these. But regardless, you will get the money in the front end. So this is not a reimbursement program. It's a front end program. You'll get a check for the amount of the cost, and then you'll be responsible for following that up with a check-in that I will set up with you about halfway through the year, and then with a final report that will be mailed to you and needs to be closed out by February of 2022, so after that year. And again, all of this will be followed up in materials that come through. It's a brief, very quick overview. And we'll walk through this slower in a minute, but I do want to turn it over to Maggie to tell you, there's Maggie in my faith check, and Scott Alvey, our executive director, on the stairs at Pleasant Hill outside their delicious restaurant that you should, go visit and spend some time in, congratulating them on their project. So Maggie, can you tell us a little bit about your project?
Happy to. So yeah, that was a fun day. We loved the opportunity to work with KHS and with the Local History Trust Fund. So just kind of an overview on our project. So we run daily public programs, or we have in the past. Right now with COVID, we put them on hold temporarily. And so this grant came at a very fortuitous time in a lot of ways, and I'll explain why in a moment. But we run a daily list of programs, and one of our programs, Objects and Stories, really kind of allows visitors to get up close and personal with our artifact collection. We kind of dig deeper, we learn how to read an artifact together, and then use that Shaker material culture to really kind of explore the personal narratives of Pleasant Hill. And so it is an important story to kind of break the barrier in a lot of ways between the individuals and the personal lives of Shakers, and get them to connect with the story in a different way. But we know from data that roughly 25% of our visitors take these daily public programs. And so we wanted to put up a temporary exhibit that allowed people to kind of, again, dig into those personal stories through artifact analysis and through material culture. And so our project was for a temporary exhibit called Pieces of Pleasant Hill. And here you see on the slide one of our rooms. This is in the Center Family Dwelling, so the largest building in our village. We have 6 rooms sectioned out with some of these artifacts on display. And so this was a great opportunity to kind of allow that visitor that maybe doesn't want to participate in a public program. It allows them to see these objects in a very different way. And so as mentioned, with COVID, with the halting of our public programs, it really has been a great exhibit to have up, because it does help us get to those important stories. So with this exhibit, the guiding question was, why do we collect artifacts? And then our big idea was Shaker Village of Pleasant Hill's artifact collection provides a tangible connection to the individuals that called this community home. And by exploring the artifacts as well as the process of collecting and documenting, we encourage visitors to think critically about their own objects and the stories that they can tell about families and communities. And so we had some core takeaways or outcomes. One outcome was to just be able to get more artifacts out on display. We've been working hard to get more objects out there, more exhibits, and so that definitely has happened. We've been able to put out 21 objects here with this exhibit alone, and it also, this grant allowed us to kind of move around some of our objects. We had talked about some of our larger pieces being in offsite storage, and this grant was really helpful in being able to move some of these back on site and kind of shuffle things around. And we are proud to say that we don't have any objects stored offsite. They're all on site now. So it was a really helpful grant in that way as well. And again, our last outcome was that connection to the individual stories, and allowing people to kind of explore the artifacts at their own pace on their own. And we also wanted to incorporate a survey to kind of track that. And so you see in this panel, this is our kind of orientation or intro panel in our space to greet people and welcome them to the exhibit. And it is kind of hard to read here, but we have a QR code survey. Normally we like to have papers and things for people to touch. And so we're trying to find ways to adapt in this COVID world. And so having the opportunity, if you have an iPhone, to just open your camera and really scan that code, and it goes straight to an intro survey that asks how many times they have visited, asks them to think of one word that might describe the Shakers. And it's kind of a challenge in a lot of ways if you to pick one word to describe this site or the people that lived here. But it really does help to kind of distill it down. And we can track that and really see if the exhibit, because there's also a question in there, have you visited the exhibit, yes or no? And so we can really see if people are changing their impression or opinion of the Shakers based on their experience in the exhibit. And so it's really fun to read through some of those responses, and it is very telling in a lot of ways. So we've had a really good time with this exhibit being up. We did have to postpone the opening. We had intended originally to open it in March. And that's really when we closed to the public. And so that was put on hold temporarily, but then we were open back up in June, and we were able to open to the public on the 7th of August. So it's been up for a month. We've heard good things, good feedback. And so it's really just helpful to have these pieces. Another important part, one more if you don't mind, part of the grant was capacity building. And so not only did we want to get more artifacts on display, we wanted to build temporary exhibit cases so that we can continue to use them. And we were able to build 19 stands. And so we're really happy that we have a good set of stands that we can bring back out for future temporary exhibits. This exhibit was only supposed to be up for 3 months. And we've already started to talk about extending it and just rotating out objects. So again, a continuation of that story and bringing more objects out. So we're lucky and happy and had a great experience.
Thank you so much. And we're so excited to be able to share these projects. So one of the things that we work on, and it's been, again, we all know where we are in this current world, but one of the things we try to do is celebrate out really the grant funded projects when possible. And so much of the work that Shaker Village has put into their exhibit will go on, and we're really proud of the work that you've done and to be able to support that work. So thank you for sharing it with us. And I hope if you're able to stick around and you can answer some questions if folks have it. And if not, you can visit Maggie and Shaker Village. They are open to the public. It's a beautiful site. If you're in Central Kentucky, go for a tour and a walk, and then grab some good food at the restaurant. And if you want to stay overnight, I believe their rooms are also open. So all of that is there, and you can visit them and see their great trust funded work. So now you have a little background on what the trust fund is. You've heard about a project. How do you get the money? A couple of things before we go on to what's on this slide. Who is eligible? Any 501c3 organization, as well as organizations that are funded, nonprofits, tax-exempt organizations that are assigned to or associated with government. So I see a number of you that are from state parks. You are eligible. You do not have to apply through your friends group, though that might be easier for you if that's something you want to do. You can apply as your state park entity, and we have funded state parks in the past. I know a number of you are also members of libraries or work for public libraries. You are also eligible. We view this as history-minded organizations. So we're looking for history projects that are grounded in very deep history and good history. And we'll talk about what that means in a minute. But it does not, we view history organizations and history-minded organizations broadly as cultural organizations, because history comes to us and with us in lots of different ways. And we want to work with our partners across industry and across cultural sectors to do better history. And that's the point of these grants. Maggie also mentioned that the grant talks about capacity building. We are looking for to fund both planning and project grants that show sustainability and capacity building for organizations. So if you're thinking about applying for something that you've done every year, making that ask is going to be a lot harder than if you want to show us how a new program or a focus on board governance would help you think about sustainability and capacity building for your volunteers or for your staff or whatever that is. One other thing I failed to mention before because I was so excited to hear about Shaker Village. We do fund institutional capacity building projects like strategic planning. Because we believe that healthy organizations need to be on healthy footing, and that often means strategic planning or taking a step back and looking internally. So unlike a lot of grants you'll see, it does not have to be this very specific project. In fact, we want it to be, we believe and we know it's important that if you need to build capacity and you need to think about institutional governance, to support that work first. Now, if you have some incredible project like Shaker Village, we want to hear about that too. But I do want you to know that that is possible. We also see these grants as gateways to other grant projects. So if you are awarded a trust fund grant, say for strategic planning, and then in a year or in 2 years, you come back with another project, that's awesome. If you are awarded a trust fund grant for a project, and then you want to expand that, we are here to help you think about that. So these are entry grants, we see them as low barrier grants to set you up for larger grants like the IMLS Inspire grants for small museums, like federal grants from the Institute for Museum and Library Services, from the National Endowment for the Humanities, from regional grants and things like that. And you'll see that as we go through the grant process and what the application looks like, that these are lower bar grants. So we're not asking for 30 pages of narrative as you would see in a federal grant. We don't have time to read that, and you all don't have time to write that. We want something much more succinct. So what does the grant look like? The first couple of pages are basic demographic and reporting questions. So your 501c3 or your tax exempt number, who your state and local representatives are. And I want to highlight that just for a second. We are asking for state representatives and then your local federal representative. Okay, so I'm in the 6th District of Kentucky. My federal representative is Andy Barr. If you are in Louisville, your federal representative is Representative Yarmouth. Yes, okay. And then I don't know what I know their names, I can't remember what district they go to. But that local representative, what we're asking for at the state level is your state senator and your state rep. So who is representing you in Frankfurt, not who is representing you in DC. And that, we ask for that because we report this to their offices and we want them to celebrate you as well. And it just is a line for us to know that. And occasionally reviewers will note when the wrong name is in that spot, in those spots. So pay attention to that. Couple of, then there's like the project manager and the project director, who the money goes through, those sorts of things. That's pretty basic. The first meaty part are the narrative and the abstract, and I have them backwards for a specific reason. A narrative is a maximum of 1,000 words, and it should tell us about the totality of what you're trying to do. We want to know the public impact, how this is sustainable, and evaluation. And Maggie told us all of that very succinctly in her description of her project. Of their project, but that evaluation piece is really important. So they had their, we're going to put up a QR code. We're going to figure out how to do this in a COVID world. So we're able to report back. That may not be the way that you are able to do it, but thinking about evaluation. How are we going to know that we did what we said we were going to do, or we didn't do what we thought we were doing, but we did something else? That could be through a survey, it could be through observation, it could be through, if you're doing something like collections care, it could be a reporting of, we assessed 20 objects and rehoused 19 of them because they were in poor housing conditions. That would be an evaluation in there as well. The other part of that then is who's going to do the work. So thinking very carefully, if it's volunteers, how are you going to recruit them? If it's paid personnel, what about their qualifications makes them appropriate for that position? And doing that in a somewhat succinct manner. So we don't need to see everybody's CVs, but we need to highlight, if you're doing an education program, is this person, does this person have a background in education, or have they been trained as a museum educator or something like that? For sustainability, we're not asking you to prove that you can keep this project going for 15 years, but we are asking to see how you're going to continue the program and how this is going to impact your sustainability as an organization. So we're less interested, and our reviewers are less interested in one-off programming and more on an impactful long-term program or project. So something like collection stewardship, rehousing an object, is very important because it can lead to long-term sustainability of both that object and of your institution, or something like an education program with fourth graders. Doing it well keeps a sustainable relationship with the schools, something like that. So we want to see that. Now, why did I talk about narrative first? Because I suggest you write your narrative before you write your abstract. Abstracts are succinct, so no more than 250 word description of your narrative, of the project. So give me the key points and the person that's going to do them in 250 words or less. And instead of starting with your abstract and writing out, I suggest writing out and then editing down so you really get to it. But make sure that they match, so that, if multiple people are writing, that they match, but also that you didn't get so excited in your narrative that you're talking about things that aren't supported in the abstract, or vice versa, which it often happens, right? Like, we're going to get really succinct in the abstract and we're going to use 5 words to say we're going to do X, Y, and Z with the project, and then Z is never described in the narrative, and reviewers are like, but what about this? And that will be a quick way to mark people down. One final thing about the abstract, if at all possible, do not use jargon, because our reviewers, while are steeped in local history, are very good, may not know something specific about a collections care best practice, or may not know why a certain methodology in museum interpretation is important. And you don't need to waste words describing that in an abstract when you can just say something without the museum jargon. That would be better. It's easier to read. We also pool, awarded grants are pooled from, their descriptions are often pulled from the abstract. So it's just frankly less work for our marketing team to have to understand if there isn't jargon in those abstracts. Most of this I feel like is a little boilerplate, but we like to go over it. So if there's something that's unclear or you have a question, please interrupt. Okay, moving on from there. There's 2 boxes that are really important for how reviewers are going to think about sustainability in your understanding of the impact of your project. And those are the outcomes and then a connection to history relevance. The outcomes are not just, all right, we rehoused 15 items, right? This is how they relate to the sustainability and goals of your organization. So why these items and how they do that, and how it's measurable. So how are you choosing them? How are you prioritizing their care? And then how are you going to measure the impact of that? It could be, oh, we expect to discover new things in our collection that we didn't know we had. Or it could be, we hope to, an outcome of this rehousing is that more people will ask to borrow these items and we'll be able to increase fees for that. Something like that. For an education program, it can often be tied to education standards or visitors. But again, it's that clear, achievable, measurable. If you feel like you're struggling coming up with outcomes, that might tell you a few things about the viability of your project, about what you're asking for. Outcomes should be always tied to the goals of your institution and to your long-term strategic plans. If you're asking for funding to think about strategic planning, an outcome can be getting the organization on better footing so we know where we're going. And you would measure that because you would come through with a plan by the end of this and you would be able to look back at it. I will tell you, when I do one-on-one conversations with folks, we often spend a long time on outcomes, and I'm very happy to sit down with you to schedule a Zoom call to talk through outcomes of your individual project and what is measurable and sustainable. The second part, the History Relevance Campaign, is a program that is hosted by AASLH and others to talk about the role and the value of history in our everyday lives. And we, as the signers of this pledge, and to work quickly with it, to work closely with it, ask those applicants through the Local History Trust Fund to think about the statement and to tie their requests to the values of history. So teaching critical skills, how history provides vital places to live and work, how history can help us create engaged citizens. And so if you can think about there's a list on that link, you can think about it, and I would show it to you, but unfortunately it is blocked by the state server in very weird ways. And so I don't know, guys, questions. But you can click there and see that. And as you think about planning, to list no more than 3, at least 1, but no more than 3 connections to relevance for your organization and for the project itself. And these help reviewers really think about how you think about your project and the role you see it playing in your communities and in your organization. And it helps you think about who you can partner with and how you can reach out, and how these projects can be more than just an internal piece, but also an external piece for communities. All right, the budget. I know I'm going through this very fast. I'm sorry, guys. I want Sarah to have time too. So the budget, a couple of things about the budget. You do not have to have a match for these grants. It is 100% if you can do it in $2,500 and we have $2,500 to give you, that's fine. If you have a match, we would like to see that. So there's a spreadsheet and a narrative. On the spreadsheet, there's a line that says match, and then it's broken down in various ways. The narrative is how you're going to justify the money you're asking for. So how did you get the figures? Do you have bids? If you say you want to build some reusable object cases, are you doing internal work? Did you get external bids? If you want to reframe something, did you get bids? And how did you come with these numbers? If you want to hire a consultant, have you talked to someone? Or are you just ballparking numbers and you're not really sure? We do like to see bids for contract work. We expect them, particularly for larger projects or for any kind of consulting. So if you're thinking about applying for strategic planning money and you're thinking about hiring a consultant, you should start having those conversations and get a bid that you can slide into your application. If you're thinking about hiring an educator, if you're thinking about hiring someone that can help you on an hourly basis to think about interpretation, all of those, a letter from that person that says, I work at X, Y, or Z rate for X, Y, or Z hours will help us understand that. The spreadsheet is raw numbers. So all we need to do is see the numbers and see that they add up. I cannot tell you how many times we have gotten grants where the narrative numbers and the spreadsheet numbers don't match. and we don't know what to do with that. We often take either the lower, or the grant is scored down because the budget numbers don't match, and that makes us ask some questions. So really think about that. Because you're not required to have matching funds, if they're not in there, we will assume that your project will only cost that $2,500, how much you're asking for. If you're asking for a portion of funding for a much larger project, in your justification, in your budget narrative, we need to know how you're going to cover the rest of that cost. Are you looking for other grants? Do you have it in operating expenses already? Have you already done a campaign and this is the last piece to get you over the edge? Is it you're going to match the cost with something like volunteer hours to make up for labor? We just need to see that because the danger in funding a project that's not fully budgeted out is that if you got this grant but you didn't say get the other $10,000 that you needed, can you do the project without that? And we want to fund things that can be completed in that way. Budgets are hard, and we understand that this is difficult. I do want to say the other thing about budgets is that we do not fund general operating expenses in a budget. So you cannot write in, say, a CEO, 10% of a CEO salary, or 10% of an educator's time. You can write in their time, but not their salary. We don't pay for lights and heat and water and things like that either. So that kind of overhead expenses cannot be written into a budget. That is the quick and dirty, and I don't know why this is all going forward. I'm sorry, Sarah, of the trust fund. Again, projects that are not oral history, that are not historical markers, and that are not brick and mortar. Almost anything else is fundable, and we will do that. Talked for a long time. Sarah's going to talk very quickly, not very quickly, she can talk as fast as she needs to. Sarah's going to talk about the oral history grants now, and then we'll quickly show you kind of a scoring guide and answer questions and things like that. So I'm going to stop talking, and Sarah's going to have the floor.
Yeah, I'm going to let you advance the slide for me, though. I think you have full control of that. I don't think I could even if I wanted to. So the Kentucky Oral History Commission has sort of one big pool of grant money that they divvy out into several different grant categories. Some of these are monetized, meaning that they have money that comes along with them, and some of them are not. They're a type of assistance or equipment loan grant. And so I'm going to tell you about each of those really quickly in case there's something you're interested in. And let's see. Oh, one of the unique things about Kentucky Oral History Commission grants is almost everything that Mandy has said about Local History Trust Fund is also going to be true about my grants, except we do offer assistance to individuals. So that's a rare thing to find in the grant world. You can apply as an organization, but you can also apply as an individual who wants to do an oral history project. And you can go on to the next slide, Mandy. I see you literally have your hands full, but so the first two grants I'd like to tell you about are about collecting oral histories. The first one, the technical assistance, is one of the non-monetized grants. So essentially you write an application to me, or to the Oral History Commission rather, and you tell me what it is that you want to do, what it is you want to collect, why it's important somehow to Kentucky history, why it's significant, and generally why it's been under-documented and proving that it's not really been documented in another collection. How you're going to do that. Specifically, give me a timeline, and then demonstrate that you can. Show me a budget that demonstrates, not necessarily a budget with the technical assistance, but just demonstrate that there's some expertise, or that you have an advisor that can show you how to do that. or at least work with you along the way. And so then I would loan you some equipment when it becomes available. I will tell you it is in short supply right now. Apparently being in a pandemic has led people to really feel strongly about documenting particularly local and family history. And then I will do training. And of course, we can do it remotely like this, just on Zoom. And next, very similar to that, you show me the same things, but you also show me a budget. And we offer up to $7,500. It's a one-to-one match, but that match can be 100% in kind. You don't have to show me any sort of cash contribution. So you can quantify your office space. If you have borrowed equipment for someone else, you can give me the fair market value of that and use that as your match. You can come up with your match in a lot of creative ways. Generally, the project grant funds, the biggest expense should be the interviews themselves. And we fund $100 per interview hour. Most oral history interviews run between 45 minutes and 120 minutes. So you kind of can guess, if you're going to do 25 interviews, that you will be asking for $2,500. And then we will also pay for some travel. Obviously, in the COVID world, travel is less of an expense. And then some office materials and things like that. If you buy equipment with this grant, which you can, you do have to give it back to us at the end. Womp womp. So it's better to borrow it, beg, borrow, and steal if you can, rather than doing it that way, because it cuts into your the number of interviews that you can do to be able to buy that equipment. And so the other categories we have are more for making oral histories accessible to the public. So great, wonderful. You've collected an oral history project maybe on the anniversary of your organization, or maybe you work for an organization that serves a living constituency, and you want to document sort of the folks that are involved in historically significant events, but then you don't want them to sit on servers or sit on a shelf. And so the next step, sort of taking it from like milk to meat, is transcription and indexing. So we will fund that up to $5,000. There is no match required for that. It's basically, we pay $120 per interview hour for transcription, $40 for interview hour for indexing, which is essentially going through that interview and marking the time at which the topics change during the interview. And then we've added a little bit, I believe it was $10 per hour for syncing transcripts. This is specific to transcripts that are going to be online and matched with an interview if they're going to be streaming. So that, and then last but not least, my favorite is a presentation grant. So if you have an existing oral history collection, or there's an institution that has an oral history collection that you're interested in interpreting in your space. So for example, if you're a Louisville museum of some sort, or a Louisville cultural entity, or even not, you're just a podcaster, and the University of Louisville's Oral History Center has a collection that you're interested in doing a series of podcast interviews on, or an audio exhibit, or even an online exhibit, and you want to use that, but you need funding for personnel that can do that editing for you, fees for different types of platforms that you can post it on. We will pay $2,500 up to that amount with a one-to-one match. Again, that match can be 100% in kind. So if you have existing oral history collections, or like I said, you are interested in incorporating some oral histories into in-person or online exhibits, that's a great opportunity with that grant. And then last but not least, for archives, we do offer a preservation assistance. So if you have cassette tapes laying around, or reel-to-reel, open reel interviews, and you would like to digitize those to be able to use for your patrons, we offer an equipment loan to have those digitized with preservation assistance. Again, that's not money, that's an equipment loan. I will train you how to use that equipment. It is much easier than it looks. It's like pop the tape in, hit the right button, you know, and the sound comes out here. So it's not overly complicated. And then we offer a preservation grant. So if you have something that it's delicate, I won't say like a wax cylinder, that would be really rare. But let's say you have some cassette tapes that have been stored maybe in unstable conditions in someone's garage or whatever, or an offsite storage, and it wouldn't be a good idea to try to do that yourself. We will pay up to $3,500 to send those off to preservation experts in audio to produce a digital copy for you. Lastly, we do offer archival accreditation. And what that does for you is if we have folks that are doing a project grant and they need a repository to put their interviews in, we only allow you to put those through our grant program in accredited repository. This is a kind of a rare designation. We only have a few of these in the state, but that doesn't mean that you're not necessarily eligible. And that's something that there's not an application open for. That's more of a, you talk to me about why your institution is eligible one-on-one. Just like the Local History Trust Fund grant, all of my grants are online and they're open right now. The technical assistance programs that are not monetized, they're open all year round. You can apply at any time. There's no cycle for that. And then the monetized ones are currently open until October 5th. That's actually plenty of time to write a pretty good application. And in fact, if you get it done 2 weeks early, I'll even review it and give you some comments. And I posted the link in the chat that will take you there. And I think I have one more slide for other opportunities. So in addition to the oral history grant applications, we are always doing some type of special collecting initiative. We just took applications for a COVID-19 collecting initiative, in fact. And so there are some folks around the state that are working hard on interviews about Kentucky's experience in this pandemic. And we have an ongoing opportunity collecting interviews about women who have worked or in government and politics. So whether they're poll workers, activists, have served in government at the local or state or national level, we're interested in hearing their stories. This is to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment and kind of look at women's, in those intervening years, how they've contributed to policymaking, frankly. And there's sometimes a stipend or an honorarium right now. The Women in Government and Politics, we're just, obviously you're doing that for us out of the goodness of your heart, but look for those opportunities going forward to do kind of a one-off interview or to contribute something from your particular scope of your museum to these statewide collecting initiatives. And then last but not least, even if you don't apply for a technical assistance grant, if you want to offer something to your public about oral histories, particularly around collecting family histories, that's a really popular topic. I offer sort of a 90-minute introduction to conducting oral histories on demand. We can do it just like this via Zoom. There may be opportunities in the future to do it in person in a healthy, socially distanced, mask wearing kind of way. With the idea that, we want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to do this work around the state. It's not just the purview of public historians. Everybody should be, sort of empowered and equipped to document their own histories. So I am happy to come and do those things as a program that your entity can open up to the public even. And I think that's it.
Thank you.
I'm going to put my email address in here too, and that way you can contact me directly if you want to talk about this.
Thank you. I do want to say, I know that I believe this was advertised as 2 to 3. And so if you have to go, we fully understand. We don't want to take any more time than you are able to give us. Sarah and I are both available to answer questions or to do whatever is needed. But we do, if you're able to stick around, we would like to stick around for a little review session of grants. And so if you signed up, you should have got, yesterday you got an email, and then again this morning, of some materials that we were going to reference. These are grant guidelines, review guidelines, and then 2 grants with redacted information on them for you to review. And we'll do them relatively quickly, but I am going to share a different screen in just a second when I find what I need, so that you can see what the grant review guidelines look like, because they are not in this PowerPoint. And I said I was going to do this, and now I'm not finding what I need, because that is the world we live in, right? And I bet I know what I did. There. Okay. So we're going to share a different screen once I get this where it needs to be. And then, oh no, did I freeze?
Which one are you trying to share, Mandy?
The grant review guidelines. I can't get to my, I'm frozen up, I think. Do you have them, Sarah?
Maybe. Grant reviewer guidelines 2019? Yeah. Okay, let's see if I can pull them up.
There we go. Hold on.
Oh, you got it?
Okay.
I figured we'd be in a race for time on that one.
Thank you. Do you have it?
I do.
Okay.
I'll try to share if you want me to.
I have it. I can do it if you need to.
No, go ahead. You do
it. Sorry. I'm sorry. Technical things, guys. I apologize. Y'all. So this was sent to you in an email, and if you weren't able to open it, I will resend all of this after we're done. But this is what our reviewers are given. It's just a PDF of what we're asking them to review. They use a 10-point scale, and then each individual review is anonymized with the numbers and then averaged. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second when we go back to the slides. But reviewers are asked to consider the relevance of the project, the demonstrated ability to complete a project. So that's where that part of the narrative, when you tell us who is doing the work and why they're qualified, is so important. The outcomes and impacts, and then the overall quality of the proposal. So if, say, when we talked about the budget numbers not matching in the narrative, the justification, and then the spreadsheet, that is going to come out in the quality of proposal number. They are then given and then there's the budget as well. These are weighted within their impact on the proposal, on the evaluation, so that the relevance and demonstrated ability and outcomes, as well as the budget, outweigh the quality of the proposal. We understand that you all are busy, and many of you are like a one person running a large entity or trying to corral 15 volunteers to get a program done. We fully understand that. So we are not going to undermine a quality proposal because there are typos. Now you may get a smaller score there, but it doesn't hold the exact same weight as the relevance or the demonstrated ability to complete. So we want you to know that we realize that you are humans in difficult situations trying to do this. So the first of the 2 applications we sent, if we were doing this in person, we would give you some time to review as a group and to discuss what you thought about them, because we're already pressed a little bit for time, and unfortunately, we can't be together in person. If anyone did have a chance to review those applications beforehand and had any thoughts or questions, we'd like to hear about it, and then we'll let you know. I'll show you what the results were for those. So did anyone have a chance to review them by chance? And I understand if you didn't, we're all busy. Oh, okay, Sheila, can you tell us anything about them? You're muted. Is there a way? Sheila, we can't, you're still on mute. There you go, good.
Are you sure? Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, this is really trivial. So I almost hate to say it out loud because no one experiences more technical issues than I do. Here at Old Mulkey, we operate on a 1.8 person staff. I'm the 1 and the 0.8 is the maintenance man. And I am not technical savvy. So I just found it distracting as a reviewer that application, I guess it was number 2. It always said, please see the attachment. Well, then I had to go and find the attachment and refer back to what the question was that they were answering. And I know that's so trivial, but that just annoyed me. And because I read it first, it was automatically at a disadvantage in my book.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point you're making, that reviewers, just like we're telling you that we know that you're humans, reviewers are humans too. And so as you make an application more complicated, or you add maybe unasked for material, reviewers can start to have feelings about your application that come through in the way that they score. And that's the same thing when we talk about the way, yeah, Sarah says the same thing. It's not trivial. You don't want to review annoy reviewers. When you talk about, when we talk about the quality of the proposal, right? If there's a consistent issue, reviewers are going to start to see that and to make it through. So that first application, there was a request for $1,500. And they were asking for a, I believe, a microphone reader. And this application did not have, the $1,500 they were asking for would not cover all of their expenses, and they did not show the way they were going to match that was going to be through a funding drive, and they didn't have the full amount. So you can see our reviewer 5 was particularly rough on this application. And so it was all over the place. This was not a funded request in the year that it was requested. And the main takeaway from that was they were asking for $1,500 for a $10,000 project, and they didn't have the other $8,500 really accounted for yet and in hand. And there were other issues. The second application, go ahead,
Just
Sarah.
a problem that's actually related to Sheila's is, as a reviewer, as a grant administrator, grant writer, and as a reviewer, I know it's very elementary to answer the question that's being asked under that heading. However, it is very important to do that because you don't want reviewers to have to hunt for an answer. I realize sometimes when you write a narrative, you get all of the everything out about the project that you think of, or maybe you're copy and pasting from another proposal, right? But you're really answering that question under that heading. And that way, if they have to go back and reassess something, they don't have to hunt for outcomes under another area. Is really similar to what Sheila's saying. You know, one is logistical and the other is more sort of writing style, but they're still, you know, just anything you can do to make it easier to find what they're looking for, you're giving yourself a better opportunity.
Yes. So the second application, then you can see from our scores, and if you review it, was scored very, very highly. This is the longer one. They talk about the iron furnace. They're asking for a small part of a large project, but they show very clearly how they were going to fund it. And while I do believe there were some logistical issues with where everything was, it was scored as higher because it was very clear, it was very defensible, it was very relevant not only to larger history of the area, but particularly their site, and they made those connections. And so we provide these so that you have models for what, and these are from a few years ago. The project that was funded is complete, and we can show that you have models for what good and less good applications look like and to look out for as you're writing them. That is the entirety of our part of the presentation. Again, it's 3:03. We fully understand if you have to go. Maggie did have to jump off, but if anyone has specific questions for the work that they did at Shaker Village or how they use the grant, she has shared her email and I can share it with all of you. I at least can hang around for a few minutes, and I'm happy to talk with anybody who would like to share anything for the projects that they're thinking about or concerns that they have. I'm also going to drop my email in the chat box. Please reach out to me. As Sarah mentioned, she reviews grants within 2 weeks. No, they need to be into her 2 weeks before her grant deadline. So that would be Monday, Sarah, I'm gonna keep saying
It is in the guidelines.
perfect. So it's in the grant guidelines,
But it's 2 Mondays before October 5th. I do know that.
And for me, as long as I see a grant draft by October 8th, which is the Friday before they would be due on the 15th, I will review them. The earlier you get them to me, the more likely I am to be able to give you substantial reviews and have a conversation. It is September 21st. And those, from now until October 15th, I am happy to set up a meeting to talk with you, to talk through projects or proposals, planning grants, the difference between if this should be a planning or a project proposal. All you have to do is send me an email and we can set up a Zoom, and I'll figure out a time that my children will not interrupt us, or you can meet them and they're fun and it'll be fun. Thank you all so much. If you have questions, please stick around or drop them in the chat. And if not, we hope you have a wonderful rest of your week and get a chance to enjoy the fall. So Heidi, no, you can use your parks. You would just show that the parks does. So Heidi asked about the STEPS program through ASLH. Your individual park would not have to enroll because you have that already. Also, the STEPS program is changing. So Heidi, if you have questions about STEPS, let me know and I'll be able to get you some more information about that. Go ahead, Sheila. You're so muted. There you go.
I have such a problem thinking conceptually. Does anybody else deal with that? I mean, y'all sound like you write these things all the time, but I don't. And I have all these, ideas of things I would like to do here at the park, but then when I look at a grant application and how to